All right, guys, it is Tuesday. We're here to talk college basketball, and we're here to talk the SEC. Tuesdays, I've been on the show basically every Tuesday, all conference play, and we've done extremely well with the SEC free plays. So today, I'm going to give you one of my client plays because I'm making a play in this game, and it's the game that we were going to talk about. It's the game, one of the games of the night in the SEC and of all of college basketball, and that is Florida taking on Georgia in what I consider to be basically a play-in game for Georgia to the NCAA tournament. I think if they can win this game, it's going to be difficult, even with their conference record, because of how good the SEC is. It's going to be difficult to leave them out of the NCAA tournament field. And so I do like Georgia plus 7.5. I played plus 7.5, slightly juiced earlier today. I think 7.5 minus 115 as a client play, 4% play. And I just had to do it. Like, Georgia's a team that I've been high on since the beginning of the season. I got to see this team play a couple times last year. And, I felt like they had a perfect mix of here. I like the guys from the MAC conference they brought in to the mix, Dakota LaFew. There's another one from Mount St. Mary's. So the point is, I had Georgia sort of as a team that I thought would overachieve in this league, and they have, but they haven't really done it in conference play because there's just not enough wins to go around for how many good teams there are in the SEC. This league is so loaded that a team like Georgia, who's had a pretty good season, can come in at 4-10 in conference play or whatever it might be. And amazingly, it's probably only one signature win away from being in the NCAA tournament. I really strongly believe that if Georgia wins this game and knocks off of Florida, they're right on the bubble, essentially controlling their own destiny. So I tend to not really get sucked into the spot play like this. But at the end of the season, when you're in late February, I do think these home spots matter. I'll give Georgia full marks for home court here, maybe more so than I have all season, because it's like one of those final games of the year, and a win does so much more here for Georgia than it would for Florida. Like, without a doubt, this game means exponentially more to Georgia than it does to Florida. Now, that doesn't mean Florida can't come out and roll through this game and win. They crushed Georgia in the first meeting. They've owned Georgia in recent years. But I think there's reasons to believe that Georgia can hang around here. I went back to my handicap of the first meeting, which was a game that we talked about on this show, and looked at why I made a case for Georgia. I believe they were an 11.5 point underdog in that game. And it didn't work out because Florida came out, put up 51 points in the first half, and forced Georgia to really play from behind. But I think a lot of those things could play here. Now, Georgia does a decent job of defending the three-point line. And that is an area that you can sort of bait Florida into, maybe falling in love with, where it's not their absolute strength. Florida's a very good shooting team. They're an elite offensive team. We all know that. They have a bunch of good three-point shooters, but collectively as a team, they're outside the top 100 nationally shooting the three. And we've seen a couple of scenarios where, Tennessee did a really good job on them defensively. That was like the outlier, right? Florida scored 44 points in that most recent meeting with Tennessee and lost by 20. But the point is, Georgia is very sound defensively. They can defend the three-point arc. And I think, if you can get Florida maybe missing some shots, they're on the road missing some shots from out there, you can get them in a spot where a team like Georgia can beat a team like Florida. We've seen, Missouri's obviously turned out to be better than anyone expected. They knocked off Florida. The game that comes to mind that I think profiles similar was the game at South Carolina earlier this year where Florida won by 1. So the way I'll put this in a nutshell, Florida, they're elite offensively. Georgia's still very good offensively. Florida's an elite rebounding team. Georgia is a quality rebounding team. And then defensively, Florida, we know Florida's elite. That's apparent. You're not going to surprise anyone with that. But Georgia's a top 40 defensive team as well. And I think if Georgia can avoid the turnovers, and I think if they can can avoid Florida coming out and doing like what they've done in a couple games recently, where they just torch a team for like 15 for 30 from three, because I think Georgia's defense is good enough to not allow that. I have a feeling you're going to see Florida in a dogfight here, no pun intended. And in that type of game, this is one spot where I think Georgia absolutely might want it a little bit more, and that's at least going to keep them in this game. So I took Georgia plus 7.5, and I spent a little extra time on it right now because that is one of my 4% client plays for this evening, which I've decided to give you for free here on the Wager Talk College Basketball Show. If you want the other 4%er, head on over to my page at WagerTalk, wt.buzz/AT. It is Tuesday, which means it's only $5. All handicappers have a play up for $5 today. I've got a 4% college basketball play that goes later tonight in the second wave of games that you can get for just $5. And I just gave you my first one with Georgia plus 7.5. Okay, we're going to head to the ACC. This breakdown's not going to take me as long because there's not as much to talk about here. You've got the best team in the league in Duke, one of the best teams in the country, against the worst team in the league, or certainly one of the worst teams in the league, as bad of a power conference team as you're going to find this year in the Miami Hurricanes. So what can we talk about here? Well, first, I'll point out something I talked about, I think, last week on Monday when Duke was about to play Virginia. And that is, it's really going to make more sense for Duke right now to just spread the minutes around. Malik Brown is out indefinitely with I believe, a shoulder injury right now. They can't afford to get anyone injured. So in a game like this, where you're a 22-point favorite on the road, like it just doesn't make sense for Duke to push their starters like more than like 25, 30 minutes in this game. Unless it's a game, right? Like, so unless for some reason Duke finds themselves in a tight game, which I don't think they will. So as far as the number is concerned, I do think there's value here on the Miami side. Now, when we talk about, it's like value relative to the number. You've got a 22-point spread. I think this should be more like an 18.5-point spread. So, 4 points doesn't mean as much in a game with a spread this big. It's not like me saying, okay, well, I've got this +3, it's +7, I've got it +3. But I do think it demonstrates that there's value on Miami. And I will point out that Miami has, since they got that first win over Notre Dame, they've played a lot better. Like they look like they care. That was my biggest thing. Go back to the previous road trip prior to the Notre Dame game. They were out on the West Coast, and they could not have cared less against Stanford. They did hang around and cover against Cal, but it almost looks like they got a little bit rejuvenated after beating Notre Dame. And you look at what they've done since. They beat Syracuse, which was a nice win. I thought they actually played extremely well in that game, put up 90 points. So you got the win over Notre Dame, the win over Syracuse, Louisville, covered against Pitt, covered against Florida State. So starting to hang around as a big underdog in some of these games, whereas they were, prior to that, they were just getting blown out. Now, I would want to know the status of Matthew Cleveland here. He missed the Virginia Tech game over the weekend, and I don't know that I could touch Miami without him. He's their leading scorer, 16.3 points per game, and Miami got crushed without him over the weekend against Virginia Tech. But when you look at Miami, they are, for a bad team, they're top 100 in field goal percentage, 46.4%. They make their foul shots, and they don't turn the ball over. So some of those numbers are not what you would expect from a team at the very bottom of a 17-team league. I do think there's a little bit of upside to this Miami team. I think Duke might be a fade as a big favorite, knowing that they're probably going to play their bench extended minutes for the rest of the regular season. Is it going to get me to the window with Miami plus 22.5? Probably not, especially not if Matthew Cleveland can't play. But I wouldn't lay it here with Duke. So Miami or pass for me on this one. I did give you Georgia plus 7.5, which is a 4% client play for me. And for my other 4% selection on Tuesday, you're going to head over to WagerTalk, check out my page, wt.buzz/AT, and it's just $5 because it's $5 Tuesday. Like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow.